Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast. That is, Play the Opinion Potomac Watch Podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with my two colleagues, Barn Swaim and Kim Strassel. And let's shift gears to the House Speaker's race, the ongoing entertainment. If you're in the press corps, not so much if you're running the House. Jim Jordan went down for the third time and then had a secret ballot where he asked if the members if he should be the Republican nominee for Speaker another time. And I think he got 50-some votes, so that was a resounding no. Now 9 new members have thrown their names into the mix, and they were going to get, I guess, 2 or 3 minutes to make their case to the members. And then we'll have votes tomorrow, Tuesday, on these, and hopefully they hope will winnow down a race. The candidates and get somebody who may have a chance or may not to get 217 votes on the floor of the House. Let's listen first to Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker, talk about the race and who he's supporting.
Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, they could have done the job as Speaker. Unfortunately, the chaos has continued. We need to solve this problem. We got a wide open southern border. We got crushing inflation. We got war in the Middle East. This is not a moment in time to play around with learning on the job. We need someone who understands how to do this job. I believe Tom Emmer, our whip, he's been in the room with all of our successes, from our bills to secure the border, from Parents' Bill of Rights, from cutting $2 trillion, getting work requirements. He knows how to do the job across the street at the same time, helping us win the majority. He sets himself head and shoulders above all those others who want to run. We need to get him elected this week and move on.
Kim, Kevin McCarthy endorsing Tom Emmer, the House whip. Is that the kiss of death, though, for him with that anti-McCarthy faction, or does he actually have a shot here among the 9 candidates?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, and right there is Tom Emmer's liability. Let's remember, he's the whip. And that means that his office has very close ties with pretty much every other office in the Republican conference, because it's their job to vote count whenever there's going to be an important vote. And he's generally well respected. That's his problem, though, is that for a certain faction right now, and they made this clear with Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise also had amazing ties as a majority leader with pretty much every office. But in the end, it was the fact that McCarthy was backing him, that he was a member of leadership, that you got a certain number of Republicans more on the right of the conference who decided they were going to dig in and say no. Just as with Jim Jordan, you had a number of people more from the center of the conference who said that they were going to dig in and say no to him. So this is what we're really looking at, is to see if that dynamic can be broken. Getting to a nominee tonight will be the easy part, because the way they set this up, it's going to kick off at 6:30. They're going to have rounds. The lowest vote getter in each round gets kicked out. And then you go on to the next voting round. And so someone's going to end up on top. But whether or not, just because they get a majority in the final end vote, means that they have the ability to cohere 217 Republicans around them, that's a very, very different question. And, we can go through some of the other rest of the 9, but it all comes down to that in the end, is that you can't afford to lose even 4 or 5. And is the party going to take its lesson from what's happened over the past 20 speakerless days, or are we going to do this again?
Yeah, I think it's just chaos central there. You have 3 candidates already, McCarthy, Scalise, and Jordan, who've already got the majority of the conference as their candidate, the Republican candidate for Speaker, and then they fail on the House floor. There's a school of thought that suggests that what the Republicans should do is make this a papal election, where you put all the popes and wannabe popes, pardon, into a room, can't let them out so they can't leak to the favorite reporters. And then, not until the white smoke comes out and, we have a pope with 217 people swearing to support him on the floor, should they come out. I don't know.
I'm a fan of that, Paul. In fact, I'd put him in like a rubber room, no toilets, no food, and lock the door until they can get it together.
I don't know all of these candidates, Barton. I'm sure you don't either. Some of them are pretty obscure. Byron Donalds, the Florida congressman, is probably the most public figure there. He's on Fox a lot. He's on other channels a fair bit. He's a Trump loyalist, early supporter of Trump. He may have a support from the right flank. The other opposition to Emmer is from Trump, and folks have been letting him know that Emmer wasn't sufficiently close to Donald Trump, wasn't sufficiently supportive of Trump, hadn't endorsed him so far. And of course, with Trump, it's all about loyalty to him, the man. So that could hurt Emmer as well.
Yeah, well, speaking as a Protestant, this is a papal election I can support. The whole business, in my view, plays right into the hands of a common accusation you hear on the left. And the accusation is that the Republican Party has moved dramatically to the right over the last number of years. They've become extremists. You can't reason with them. You've heard these arguments. I think that's basically false. The GOP has moved right on immigration, and there's been some movement on foreign policy and some other marginal issues. But the core of the party is more or less where it's been for the past couple of generations: taxes, regulations, spending, and so on. Not all that much has changed policy-wise. And in fact, on some social issues, they've actually moved towards the center. What has happened is that the GOP base and many of its office holders have become what I would call tactical extremists. Hence all the government shutdowns. A lot of the stop steal nonsense was from the same sort of attitude. And hence now the ejection of a House Speaker for no obvious reason and the inability to replace him. The trouble is these kinds of antics allow Democrats to say, see, the Republicans are extremists. You can't reason with them. Look how far to the right they've gone. Mm-hmm. At bottom, though, I think a lot of the tactical extremism is a response to the base. This idea that the reason Republicans haven't achieved more policy victories over the years is that Republicans, they don't want it bad enough. They give in too easily. They won't force things. They surrender. What we need are people willing to go all the way and do whatever it takes and so on. And I think Matt Gaetz and his ilk are performing for voters and maybe cable news viewers who've largely adopted that attitude. The problem is that the Democrats can be counted on to portray the party as crazy, unreasonable, and right-wing nut jobs when the time comes. I'm sure they will.
Well, and then the problem with that attitude in the current makeup in the House is that you only hold one, you hold power. That is, you have a House majority, Republicans do, but they only have a House majority. They don't control the Senate. They don't control the White House. So when you're passing bills to fund the government, which we still have to do under the Constitution, pass appropriations bills and pass legislation like aid to Israel and Ukraine, if that's what we want to do, you have to have compromise. You have to be able to get a vote in the Senate and then get the president to sign your legislation. That means compromise, and that is anathema to a fair number of folks who play to the mindset you described. Kim, is there anybody in that list you think could be a consensus candidate?
So I would keep my eyes on 3, possibly 4 of these candidates out of the 9. Okay, so we talked about Tom Emmer. Again, generally widely respected. One question is where Donald Trump comes in on this whole race, whether or not he stays neutral. There's some question as to whether or not he likes Tom Emmer or not. Tom Emmer also most recently ran the NRCC, the Republican campaign effort for Congress, and so was behind this Republican victory that gave them the majority, although there was some criticism at the same time that it was such a narrow majority, and so some people blame him for that. Another person to watch, Kevin Hern of Oklahoma. He is currently the chair of the Republican Study Committee. That is the largest family, as it were, within the Republican conference. It has about 170 members. He is seen to be very much a kind of the embodiment of mainstream conservative thought, trusted by a lot of people, but has the benefit that he is not in the leadership, so that could help him. You mentioned Byron Donalds, who would be more the kind of Jim Jordan candidate in that he comes more from the right. But I think his potential problem there is that he may therefore incur the wrath of some of the folks who were anti-Jim Jordan last time around. They may not trust him. He's still relatively young and new too, so he's African American. That would certainly be a look for the Republican Republican Party. And then the one last person I would just keep in mind, only because of where he hails from and his longevity, is Pete Sessions, who is a Texas Republican. He's been around for ages. He himself used to run the National Republican congressional campaign, helped them win some really big victories back in 2009, 2012, where the GOP expanded their number of seats dramatically. And the reason to watch him is not necessarily that he currently holds some fancy title or big position, but if the Texas delegation were to get behind him, that would be an enormous number of votes. And so you could maybe see something being built from that. We've got a number of other people. Dan Muser from Pennsylvania, Gary Palmer, Alabama, Austin Scott, Georgia, Jack Bourbon from Michigan. But these folks, I think their kind of attitude is more like, hey, why not throw our hat in the ring? There's no obvious choice anyway. We might as well make a go of it too.
All right, we will see how this unfolds. It will be interesting, and let's hope they can actually get their act enough together to be able to have a speaker and therefore a functioning House of Representatives. So thanks, Kim. Thanks, Barton. Thank you all for listening. We're back every day with Potomac Watch, and we hope to catch you for the rest of this week and every day on Potomac Watch.